Dad slid the folder across his mahogany desk like he was serving divorce papers. His new wife, Veronica, stood behind him with her arms crossed, that satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. I picked up the papers, my hands already trembling before I even read the first line. Termination of partnership agreement. The words blurred as my vision tunneled. 23 years old, and I'd spent every summer since 16 learning this business from the ground up. I knew every supplier, every client, every deal Dad had ever closed. But apparently none of that mattered anymore. "Trevor's stepping into your role," Dad said, not even looking at me. Trevor. Veronica's son from her first marriage. The kid who'd been in our lives for barely 18 months and couldn't tell a profit margin from a parking meter. "You're replacing me." My voice came out smaller than I intended. Dad finally met my eyes. "You don't fit the direction we're taking the company. Trevor has fresh ideas. A business degree from Stanford. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal." Those two words detonated something inside my chest that I didn't know existed. I don't remember driving home. One minute I was standing in Dad's office, the next I was sitting on my apartment floor, still clutching those papers. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister, Natalie. "What happened?" "Dad just told me you're out." I couldn't bring myself to respond. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal. All those mornings I'd arrived at the office before Dad, all those late nights I'd stayed after everyone left, all those weekends I'd sacrificed while my friends went camping or took road trips. Erased. Handed to some spoiled stepbrother who probably thought quarterly reports were something you filed 4 times a year. I looked around my apartment. Modest furniture I'd bought with my own salary. Degrees on the wall from a state school, not Stanford. No trust fund, no safety net. Just me and whatever I could build with my own 2 hands. The rage that had been simmering started to crystallize into something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to beg. Wasn't going to argue. I was going to rebuild myself into something Dad would regret underestimating. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Click the notification bell, like and share with others. Thanks for your support. Monday morning I enrolled in an executive MBA program. Not Stanford. Not Harvard. A rigorous night program for working professionals who actually needed the knowledge. Not just the credential. Finance. Strategy. Corporate restructuring. I absorbed everything like I was preparing for war because I was. Professor Holland noticed during the 3rd week. She kept me after class, her sharp eyes studying me like I was a case study. "You're different from the others," she said. "They're here for promotions. You're here like your life depends on it." "Does," I replied. She smiled. "Then let me help you." Professor Holland became my mentor. She'd spent 20 years in corporate strategy before teaching, and she knew every trick, every loophole, every way to outmaneuver competitors without breaking a single law. She taught me that revenge wasn't about burning bridges. It was about building better ones while your enemies stood on rotting foundations. I started attending every networking event in the city. Not the social ones where people pretended to care. The serious ones where deals actually happened. The Chamber of Commerce Gala was where I first saw the cracks. Dad stood near the bar, one arm around Veronica, the other gesturing wildly as he talked to potential investors. Trevor lurked nearby, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. My stepson closed the Henderson account. Dad boasted loud enough for half the room to hear. "Kid's a natural. Got his mother's instincts and my business sense." I stayed in the shadows, nursing a glass of water. The Henderson account. I knew that deal. I'd spent 6 months cultivating that relationship before Dad pushed me out. Trevor hadn't closed anything. He just signed the papers I'd already negotiated. But Dad was selling the story, rewriting history to make Trevor look like a prodigy. I watched Trevor throughout the night. He didn't talk business with anyone, didn't ask questions, didn't take notes. He just smiled and nodded, riding on Dad's reputation while having no idea how to sustain it. That's when I realized something crucial. Dad wasn't just replacing me with Trevor. He was setting Trevor up to fail, too blinded by Veronica's influence to see it. Preston and Associates offered me a position 3 weeks later. They were Dad's biggest competitor, and they'd been watching me for months. "We know who you are," the hiring manager said during my interview. "We know what your father did. And we know what you're capable of." I started as a junior analyst, bottom of the ladder. But I didn't care about the title. Cared about the access. Preston and Associates handled the same type of commercial real estate development Dad's firm did. Same clients, same markets, same deals. Every day I memorized patterns. I studied which clients were loyal and which were just waiting for a better offer. I learned which of Dad's strategies were actually working and which ones were held together with luck and his reputation. And I waited. Professor Holland had taught me patience. "Desperation makes mistakes," she'd said. "Precision requires time." So I took my time building expertise, earning trust, and most importantly, staying invisible to Dad. He had no idea I was working for his biggest rival. To him, I just disappeared, probably licking my wounds somewhere irrelevant. The first crack appeared in Dad's foundation 6 months after I started at Preston. The Riverside Project. A mixed-use development that should have been straightforward but somehow got tangled in permit delays and cost overruns. I saw the announcement in the trade journal and immediately recognized the signs. Trevor's signature was all over this disaster. He'd rushed the planning phase, skipped proper environmental assessments, and locked the company into contracts with suppliers who were notorious for hidden fees. Dad was probably scrambling behind the scenes, trying to fix Trevor's mistakes without admitting his golden boy had screwed up. At our Monday morning meeting, I casually mentioned Riverside to my boss. "That project's bleeding money," I said. "Whoever's managing it doesn't understand construction timelines." My boss, Gerald Preston himself, leaned forward. "You know something?" he asked. "I know how they operate," I replied carefully. "And I know their weaknesses." Gerald smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Then let's discuss how we might position ourselves when they inevitably need help." That conversation planted the first seed. Not obvious, not aggressive, just a subtle repositioning that would matter later. I started playing a longer game. Every client meeting at Preston, I'd casually mention our reliability, our attention to detail, our commitment to finishing projects on time and under budget. I never mentioned Dad's firm by name. Didn't have to. In our industry, everyone knew everyone. Word traveled fast about who was struggling and who was thriving. One of Dad's longtime clients, a developer named Mr. Harrison, came to Preston for a consultation. I sat in on the meeting, taking notes while Gerald pitched our services. After the meeting, Mr. Harrison pulled me aside. "You're Richard's daughter, aren't you?" My stomach tightened. "Yes, sir," I replied. He studied me for a long moment. "Heard he replaced you with his stepson. Is that true?" I chose my words carefully. "My father made the choice he thought was best for his company." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "Well, his loss is Preston's gain. I've been hearing good things about your work." That was all it took. The seed of doubt, planted not by me directly, but by circumstance and Dad's own reputation for questionable decisions. 3 weeks later, Mr. Harrison moved his portfolio from Dad's firm to Preston. Dad threw a party to celebrate his 30th year in business. The invitation arrived at my apartment, probably sent by some assistant who didn't know I'd been cut out. I almost threw it away. Then I decided to go. Not as his daughter. As a representative from Preston and Associates. Gerald thought it was brilliant. "Go observe," he said. "See who's happy and who's just being polite." The party was exactly what I expected. Excessive. Oi. Veronica had clearly planned it. All crystal chandeliers and overpriced catering. Dad stood at the center of it all, Trevor beside him like a crown prince. I moved through the crowd quietly, listening. "Trevor's still learning," one of Dad's project managers whispered to another. "Richard won't admit it, but the kid's making mistakes." "How bad?" "Bad enough that we're fixing things behind the scenes. But Richard keeps putting him in charge of bigger deals." Filed that away. Then I approached Dad. He didn't see me until I was right in front of him. "Congratulations on 30 years," I said. His face went through several expressions before settling on forced politeness. "Thanks for coming," he said. The market shifted overnight. New zoning regulations dropped, changing the viability of several major projects across the city. Companies that had been planning developments suddenly faced massive complications. Dad's firm had 3 projects in the affected zones. I knew because I'd been tracking them. Trevor panicked. I heard about it through the industry grapevine before it even hit the news. He'd made commitments based on old regulations, locked the company into contracts that were now potentially worthless. Dad was apparently furious but trying to keep it quiet. Preston called an emergency strategy meeting. "This is chaos for everyone," Gerald said. "How do we position ourselves?" I pulled out the analysis I'd already prepared. These 5 projects are salvageable if handled correctly. 2 of them are currently managed by firms that don't have the expertise to adapt quickly. One of those firms was Dad's. Gerald looked at me. "Can we help them?" "We could," I said carefully. "But they'd have to ask." They didn't ask. Dad's pride wouldn't let him. But 2 of his clients did. We saved their projects. Word spread fast. Suddenly Preston wasn't just Dad's competitor. We were the firm that actually solved problems while Dad's company floundered. I discovered Dad's personal investments by accident. Or maybe not accident. Maybe I'd been looking without realizing it. His retirement portfolio was a mess. Over-leveraged real estate, outdated stocks, too much exposure to a market sector that was already showing weakness. Anyone with basic financial literacy could see it. I mentioned it to Professor Holland during one of our monthly coffee meetings. She raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I've seen the public filings. Everything that's legally accessible. It's not good." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Information like that has value. Not to you directly, but to the right people who might make their own decisions." I understood what she wasn't saying. I couldn't directly sabotage Dad. That would be illegal and obvious. But if certain people in the industry happened to notice that Richard's personal finances were shaky, they might question his business judgment. That weekend, I attended an investor conference. Happened to sit at a table with 3 major players who'd worked with Dad before. Happened to mention I was concerned about market volatility affecting over-leveraged portfolios. Happened to wonder aloud how some people didn't diversify enough. I never said Dad's name, but one of them did. Richard's always been aggressive with his investments. The others nodded. Seeds planted. Mr. Harrison wasn't the last client to jump ship. Mrs. Chen came next. She'd been with Dad's firm for 8 years, developing a chain of boutique hotels across the region. Trevor had apparently botched her latest project, mixing up construction timelines and making promises he couldn't keep. She showed up at Preston's office furious. "I need someone who actually knows what they're doing," she said. Gerald brought me into the meeting. Mrs. Chen recognized me immediately. "You're Richard's daughter." "I work for Preston now," I replied evenly. "And we don't make promises we can't keep." We spent 3 hours going through her project, identifying every mistake Trevor had made, showing her exactly how we'd fix it. By the end of the meeting, she transferred her entire portfolio to us. That was $12 million in annual revenue, gone from Dad's firm. When Mrs. Chen's departure hit the industry news, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "Dad's losing it. Blaming everyone except Trevor." Mom's name came up. "Mom," I said. My actual mom, who Dad had divorced 5 years ago to marry Veronica. Bringing her into it was low, even for him. I didn't respond to Natalie. But I did make a note. Dad was getting desperate. I ran into Uncle Frank at a charity event. Dad's older brother, who'd been pushed out of the family business 15 years ago over some dispute I'd never fully understood. Frank looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. "Heard you're doing well at Preston," he said. "Thanks, sir," I responded. We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Frank said, "Your father makes the same mistakes over and over. Did it with me. Did it with your mother. Doing it with you. Probably do it with Trevor eventually." "What mistakes?" Frank smiled sadly. "He trusts the wrong people. Your stepmom. She's running through his money faster than he can make it. Trevor's just her pawn. Richard's too stubborn to see it until it's too late. He pulled out a business card. Not his. Someone else's. This lawyer handled my case when Richard pushed me out. Knows where all the bodies are buried. Legal bodies, I mean. Might be useful for you someday. I took the card. Thomas Bennett, attorney at law. That night I called Bennett. We talked for 2 hours. About contracts. About family business law. About how sometimes the people closest to you could legally destroy you if they knew which strings to pull. I started mentoring young professionals. Not because I was trying to be noble. Because I was building an army. Preston had a program for recent graduates, and I volunteered to lead workshops on client management and project development. 20 bright, hungry kids who were exactly where I'd been 2 years ago. Eager. Overlooked. Ready to prove themselves. I taught them everything Professor Holland had taught me. Strategy. Patience. How to build relationships that lasted. How to spot opportunities before they became obvious. How to be so good that people couldn't ignore you. Within 6 months, 3 of them were managing small projects. Within a year, they were handling clients Dad's firm had been courting. My network was growing quietly, spreading through the industry like roots under a garden. Dad probably didn't even notice. He was too focused on keeping Trevor propped up and Veronica happy. But the foundation I was building would matter. When the time came, I'd have people in every major firm in the city. People who trusted me. People who owed me favors. People who remembered that I'd believed in them when they were nobody. Trevor made the cover of a regional business magazine. New generation of real estate leaders. The article was pure puff piece. No substance. Just photos of Trevor in expensive suits and quotes about innovative thinking and fresh perspectives. Dad posted it everywhere. LinkedIn, Facebook. Probably had copies printed and framed. I read the article carefully. Between the meaningless buzzwords, there were actual claims. Projects Trevor had supposedly led. Deals he'd supposedly closed. Strategies he'd supposedly created. I knew most of them were mine. Work I'd done that Trevor had simply inherited. But a few were new. Real projects Trevor was actually managing. And based on what I was hearing through my network, they were disasters waiting to happen. I didn't respond publicly. Didn't need to. Instead, I quietly published a case study through Preston about successful project management. Used real numbers. Real timelines. Real results from projects I'd actually led. No photos. No self-promotion. Just competence, documented and published in an industry journal that people actually read for substance. Within a week, 3 companies reached out to Preston specifically asking to work with me. Trevor's magazine cover went on his wall. My case study went into textbooks. The collapse started with the Meridian Tower project. Trevor's biggest solo deal. A 40-story mixed-use building downtown. $500 million in investment. Trevor had apparently promised investors a timeline that was physically impossible and a budget that didn't account for current material costs. I found out because one of the investors called Preston for a second opinion. Privately. Quietly. Desperate. I reviewed the documents. Every page made me wince. Trevor had made every rookie mistake in the book and invented a few new ones. Can this project be saved? The investor asked. I looked at the numbers again. Not with the current management. The foundation work alone is going to run 6 months behind schedule, and nobody's accounting for it. The investor's face went pale. We're about to lose everything. Not if you act now, I said carefully. But you'd need to bring in people who actually know what they're doing. 2 weeks later, 3 of Meridian Tower's major investors pulled out. The project didn't collapse immediately, but it was bleeding. Dad scrambled to find replacement funding. Trevor apparently tried to blame the contractors, the city, everyone except himself. Dad started noticing clients were leaving. Started questioning why. His paranoia was justified but misdirected. He suspected Preston was poaching, which was technically true but not provable. What he couldn't trace was me specifically. I'd been too careful, too quiet. Every client who left had their own legitimate reasons. Poor management, broken promises, better opportunities elsewhere. At Thanksgiving, Natalie told me Dad had hired a private investigator. He thinks someone's sabotaging him, she said over the phone. Is it you, she asked. I'm just doing my job, I replied honestly. If his clients are choosing Preston, that's because we're better. She was quiet for a moment. He regrets it, you know. Replacing you. Not enough to admit it. No, she agreed. Not enough for that. Dad didn't come to Thanksgiving dinner. Neither did I. Veronica apparently threw a fit about the investigator being a waste of money. Trevor stayed quiet, probably realizing he was in over his head. I spent Thanksgiving with Professor Holland and her family. She'd invited me months ago, treating me like the daughter she'd never had. Over pie, she asked what my endgame was. I don't know yet, I admitted. I just know I'm not stopping. Dad announced his biggest move yet. Acquisition of Brennan Development, a smaller firm that would give him access to the commercial sector he'd been trying to break into for years. The press release made Trevor sound like the architect of the deal. I read it 3 times, then called every contact I had. Brennan Development was failing. Anyone with access to their financials could see it. Their assets were overvalued. Their debts were hidden in subsidiary companies. Their best people had already left. Dad was about to buy a sinking ship and didn't realize it. I couldn't stop the acquisition directly, but I could make sure the right people knew about Brennan's problems. Investors who cared about due diligence. Bankers who asked hard questions. Board members who could pressure Dad to reconsider. I spent 2 weeks making strategic phone calls, sending careful emails, having concerned conversations over coffee. Never directly saying don't do it. Just raising questions. Have you seen Brennan's third-quarter numbers? Did you know their lead architect just resigned? Interesting timing for this acquisition, given the market conditions. The acquisition went through anyway. Dad's ego was too big to stop. But now everyone was watching, waiting for it to fail. The betrayal came from inside Dad's own company. His CFO, a man named Walter who'd been there for 12 years, quit abruptly and took 3 key employees with him. Started their own firm. Took 2 of Dad's clients with them. The industry exploded with speculation. Walter gave one interview, carefully worded but devastating. I disagreed with the strategic direction of the company. When leadership refuses to listen to experienced voices, it's time to move on. Leadership. Singular. Everyone knew he meant Dad. And by extension, Trevor. Dad's response was a disaster. He called Walter a traitor publicly. Threatened lawsuits. Made himself look paranoid and unstable. I watched it unfold from Preston's office, taking notes. This was what desperation looked like. When you built your empire on reputation and ego instead of competence, one crack could bring down the whole structure. Gerald came into my office. This is getting ugly. It's going to get uglier, I replied. The Brennan acquisition is going to fall apart within 3 months. Maybe sooner. How do you know, he asked. I pulled up a spreadsheet I'd been building. 'Cause I know how my father operates. And I know Trevor can't manage what they just bought. Trevor tried to go after me directly. Stupid move. He posted on LinkedIn about unethical competitors who steal clients through deception. Didn't name Preston specifically, but everyone knew who he meant. I didn't respond. Didn't have to. 10 industry professionals jumped into the comments defending Preston's reputation, pointing out that clients leave bad firms for good reasons. Asking Trevor if maybe he should focus on retaining clients instead of blaming competitors. One comment cut deep. Competence isn't stealing. It's earning. Trevor deleted the post within 6 hours. But screenshots lived forever. People forwarded them around the industry like memes. He tried to make me look bad and had only exposed his own insecurity. Professor Holland called me that night, laughing. That boy just committed career suicide. He was already failing, I said. He just made it public. Dad apparently erupted at Trevor. Natalie told me the shouting match could be heard through the office walls. Veronica defended her son, naturally. blamed Dad for putting too much pressure on Trevor. The whole company was fracturing from the inside. And I hadn't thrown a single punch. Just stood there while they destroyed themselves. The media picked up the story 2 weeks later. Not the big outlets. Trade publications. Industry blogs. Places where people who actually mattered paid attention. Generational shift gone wrong. When family businesses choose wrong successors. The article didn't mention Dad by name, but it included enough details that everyone knew. Trevor's failed projects. The exodus of experienced employees. The acquisition of a failing company. The loss of major clients. Side by side with the article was a smaller piece about Preston's growth. Our client retention. Our project success rate. My case studies. They didn't mention me by name either. But my photo was there. Rising stars in commercial development. Dad saw it. I know because Natalie sent me a screenshot of a text he'd sent her. Did you know about this? I didn't respond. But I did send Natalie a message. Tell him I'm just doing my job. That night I got a call from an unknown number. Dad's voice came through tight and angry. What are you doing? Building a career, I replied calmly. What you taught me to do. You're destroying my company. No sir, I said. I'm watching while your own choices destroy your company. There's a difference. Dad confronted me at an industry conference. Cornered me in the hotel lobby where people could see but not hear. His face was red, his hands shaking. You need to stop, he said. Stop what, Dad? Kept my voice level. Stop working hard. Or stop building relationships. Stop doing quality work. Or what exactly do you want me to stop, I asked. You're turning people against me, he said. I'm not turning anyone against you, I replied. You did that yourself when you replaced competence with nepotism. He flinched. Trevor is a good kid. Trevor is unprepared, I said. And you know it. You just can't admit it because admitting it means admitting you were wrong about me. I wasn't wrong, he said faintly. Yes, I said quietly. You were. You replaced someone who loved your company with someone who's destroying it. And now you're watching everything you built crumble because your ego mattered more than your judgment. Dad opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since this started, he looked uncertain. It's not too late to fix this, Dad, I said. But it starts with admitting you made a mistake. Can you do that? He couldn't. I watched the refusal harden in his eyes. Watched pride override logic. Stay away from my company, he said. Then walked away. The final domino fell when Westbridge Capital pulled their investment. They'd been Dad's biggest financial backer for a decade. $500 million in funding across multiple projects. Their withdrawal was professional, carefully worded, but devastating. Strategic reallocation of resources based on updated risk assessment. Everyone knew what that meant. Dad's company was too risky. Trevor had mismanaged one too many projects. The acquisition of Brennan Development had exposed how poor their due diligence was. Westbridge didn't trust them anymore. The press release went out at 9 a.m. By noon, 2 more investors had followed. By the end of the day, Dad's company had lost over $1 billion in backing. Preston's office was chaos. Phones ringing. Emails flooding in. Every client who'd been on the fence about leaving Dad's firm was now calling us. Gerald pulled me into his office. We need to be ready. This is going to get messy. He nodded. No. Can you handle it, he asked. This is your father's company collapsing. I thought about that stack of papers on Dad's desk 2 years ago. Termination of partnership agreement. I thought about Trevor's smirk. About Veronica's satisfaction. About every morning I'd woken up at 5 to prove myself. I can handle it, I said. Dad's empire didn't collapse overnight. Took 3 months. 3 months of watching projects failing, clients leaving, employees jumping ship. The Brennan acquisition became a liability instead of an asset. Trevor's name became a punchline in industry circles. Veronica apparently left. Took Trevor with her. Moved back to wherever she'd come from. Natalie said Dad had aged 10 years in 10 weeks. The news broke on a Wednesday. Richard's development group files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I was in a meeting when it happened. Someone's phone buzzed. Then another. Then everyone was checking. Gerald looked at me. You knew this was coming. I did, I admitted. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Gerald said, you brought down your own father's company. No, I corrected. I built something better while he destroyed his own company. There's a difference. After the meeting, I sat alone in my office. I'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, something. Instead, I just felt tired and sad. I'd wanted Dad to fail. But I'd wanted him to fail because he deserved to fail, not because I'd made it happen. The distinction mattered. My phone rang. It was Dad. I stared at it for 3 rings, then answered. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground. Dad looked terrible. Defeated. I ordered us both coffee and sat down across from him. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, I underestimated you, he said. Yes, I agreed. You did. But it was rather too late for you to admit it. I thought Trevor was the future. Trevor was never the future, I said. He was Veronica's son. And you let her manipulate you into destroying what you'd built. Dad's hands shook around his cup. Can you fix it for me, Jane? Fix what? I asked. My company, he said. You know how to do it. You have the connections, the expertise. You could save it. I looked at him carefully. 2 years ago, this was all I'd wanted. For him to need me. To admit I was valuable. Tell me to come back. Now it just felt hollow. I could save it, I said slowly. But I'm not going to. Why not, he asked. Because you didn't just fire me, I said. You replaced me. You told me I didn't fit into the future you were building. That Trevor was better. You made me feel worthless. And now you want me to fix your mistakes. Most importantly, I'm building my own future where it mattered. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong, he said. Yes, you were, I replied. Sorry. I know, I said. And I honestly did. I could see it in his face. Real regret. Real pain. But apologies don't undo damages. They just acknowledge it. I left that coffee shop and never looked back. Not literally. I still lived in the same city. Still worked in the same industry. But I left behind the need for Dad's approval. The anger. The bitterness. 6 months later, Preston made me a partner. Youngest in the firm's history. My name went on the letterhead. The projects I managed became the standard for quality in the region. Clients specifically requested me. Dad's company eventually dissolved completely. Assets sold off. It's paid. Name retired. Trevor reportedly went back to school, studying something completely different. Veronica remarried. Dad took a consulting job at a small firm. Quiet, humble. The opposite of what he'd been. Natalie said he asked about me sometimes. How I was doing. If I was happy. I never answered through her. But I was happy. Not because Dad had failed. But because I'd succeeded. I'd built something real. Something that couldn't be taken away. Something that didn't depend on my father's approval or on family's acceptance. Professor Holland came to my partnership celebration. Raised a glass. To the student who taught himself the best lesson of all. What's that? I asked. She smiled. That the best revenge is becoming someone they can never diminish again. I drank to that. And moved on. My revenge was not loud. It was quiet, humble, and methodical. I still ask about my dad from Tally occasionally. I still wished he recovered. He's still my father. I didn't destroy him. His choices did. What would you have done differently? How would you have responded to betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Click the notification bell, like and share with others. Thanks for your support.